All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna. I pray everybody is doing well. I pray you're doing well. If you're new, welcome to the conversation. Like, subscribe, share, and if you're coming back, you don't know anything already. Welcome back. I've been on some stuff these last few days, and I wanted to backtrack a little, so that we can kind of broaden the scope. Sometimes we get lost in the details of other people's lives, right? And it's easier to see whatever we're looking for in other people, and not see it so much in ourselves. So there's a video from Psych to Go. I kind of like that channel. They kind of make things real simple. We're going to talk about toxic parenting today because some of what, not all of what. Based on the video we watched yesterday and the guy asking, were your parents in the home? And me saying that, sometimes people assume that just because your parents are in the home, one, two parents are in the home, that means that they're good parents. You know what I mean? Just because you have a car doesn't mean it's a good car. You know what I'm saying? Uh, just because you have clothes doesn't mean it's good clothes. You have shoes. You get my point. So just because a parent is in the home, some of us are so used to bare minimum that we think just because a parent is there, or parents are there, that means that it's good. Yeah. I wanted to go over their list of 7 signs you have a toxic parent. We're going to listen to it a little bit and kind of have a conversation. And for those who may be new, this channel is about candid conversations, life, healing, business, all of the things that is who I am. Oftentimes I find it difficult, and it is difficult to separate, the healing conversation from the business conversation in the kind of way, from the food, because wherever I go, weirdly, if I'm just talking about food, some way, somehow, I my goodness, even when I don't talk about food, I find it difficult to try. So I know that it's part of my calling. So here you're going to get a little bit of all of that. We sometimes look into pop culture and see things or signs and symptoms, and clues that we can use to better ourselves and our surroundings. So with that said, we're going to go over this. And sometimes people pop in late. So I do have a toxic parent.
Do you feel happy anticipation at the thought of it, or do you feel uneasy and drained just thinking about a visit? If you find yourself choosing the latter, you may have a toxic parent.
So, okay, sign number one, and that's just even toxic relationship, period. You're just uneasy. Like, I don't want to go obligated to go or visit or see them. It's not a joy. That's how you know that something is there. And if you haven't dealt with that information, welcome to those who just joined us. You might want to you might want to
Toxic conflict with your parent is totally normal. Edging to the realm of a toxic parent is far more than the rare shouting match. It's true that you have specific pieces on toxic parenting, such as between mother or father and daughter and mother or mother with son. Here, we're aiming to present the commonalities between all of them. For the general parent to the offspring relationship, raising awareness of the issue. Here are the most common signs that could signal that you have a toxic parent.
great, very short, to the point videos, and so we're going to use it as a springboard to have the conversation.
1. They're self-centered. They'll say they love you, yet it's always their wants, needs, and emotions that take first.
The be all, the end all. If everything centers around them, and this can happen, in a family with one parent, two visual person. Before they're a parent, this person is self-absorbed and self-centered. Therefore, you do not necessarily have value, or that child doesn't have value, or they only have value if. And we spoke about this when we were looking at other things. So I think it's important. Toxic
Toxic parents don't show any remorse for things you do when you're hurting. You're not viewed as important enough to ask anything about, meaning your day, what you like, or even your opinion.
So just because they had you doesn't mean they care, right? A toxic parent, you could be having the worst day or the best day. They don't care. They can say they love you. They can never say they love you. They can never say thank you. They can have nothing but expectations of you. You better not ever try to hold them accountable for any hurt, especially if you're an adult now, that they may have done, because they might be in denial. They're going to turn it around on you. They never ever did anything. And that's signs that you have a toxic parent. So the first part of this conversation is toxic parent. The second part is the broken children, because if somebody is toxic, that means they're hazardous. If a chemical is toxic, it's hazardous, right? So in what way did this parent become hazardous? In what way did this parent injure you? If they have a hazardous chemical, they'll tell you it'll cause lung problems, liver problems, whatever it is, it'll tell you what part of the body it affects. So it is with the parent. The only difference is one has to analyze the type of toxicity that this parent emitted so that you can understand the damage that was done.
3. They're rude and disrespectful. This isn't the same as being blunt or to be confused with raw honesty. We mean they couldn't even be bothered to treat you with any decency or basic courtesy. They don't thank you for anything, even if you put in massive effort. Any suggestion you make may be responded to with mockery. You feel a little less human around them. 4.
Rude and disrespectful. No thank yous, no please. You're not a human being. And sometimes this toxic parent, depending, like I said, what type of toxicity they're emitting, sometimes this toxic parent would totally change that behavior when they're outside, right? So a narcissistic parent, for instance, or someone with narcissistic tendencies, they may treat you like crap inside, but if they get narcissistic supply from you in the public, when they go outside, all of a sudden you see a different person. So that's a level of toxicity that's coming from the type of person that person may be, if you can understand. So I said all this to say that it's not across the board. If you say everything doesn't fit, if you perchance happen to have had a toxic parent, or if you're the toxic parent, you know what I mean? It's not going to be just across the board. You have to take a look at that person specifically to see whether or not or how these things apply.
They overstep your boundaries. We've spoken about boundaries and how they're important. These types of parents will intrude on all of your personal space, despite you asking them not to. They treat access to your privacy as their right, really rifling through things like your drawers, or maybe even your phone. 5.
Okay, now pause. There is a balance in that conversation, but definitely as a human, not just because you're a small human being, because oftentimes a toxic parent who's toxic when you're little is going to be toxic when you're grown, right? And so they don't respect you as a human being. But if you're a younger child, making sure that things are in order is not necessarily invading your space. It's just taking responsibility for that soul that's in your care. But if they don't give you any space and any autonomy and any ability to greetings, Nasha, welcome to the conversation, any ability to grow in a certain way that's healthy, yeah, definitely that person is toxic. You're toxic. For those who just joined us, we're going over some points of toxic parents so we can get some understanding, and share some understanding for ourselves and others.
They're overly demanding. Overly demanding is a constant overload from your parents of nothing being quite enough, and palpable dissatisfaction at the perceived lack. You can't just shoot for the stars. You have to own the universe, and you better comply without any argument. Demand, demand, demand. Take, take, take.
So there goes another one. You get a B. Why didn't you get an A? You get an A. Why didn't you get an A plus? You won the track meet. Why didn't you get? You know what I mean? There's always something. You're never good enough, and what that creates, it can create many things in the person. Like I said, depending on the parent and the injury, but one of those things is perfectionism. Always feeling that you need to be perfect because you're not going to get approval or accolades or acceptance from the parent if you're not, right? We talked about this when we were looking at what they're calling a suicide of Miss, I think it was USA, and that family dynamic. So this is Again, toxic parenting does not look like only the person yelling and screaming at the person. It can come in different forms and shapes.
6. They belittle you. We were all children once, depending on our parents to make decisions like not having candies for breakfast. The point of growing up, though, is that you grow up and form your own agency. When your parents continue to treat you like an infant, believing they have to do all the thinking for you and ignoring what you have to say and all of your opinions are a joke to them, that's toxic. And 7. They control and or dominate you. Controlling, dominating, and overbearing. This is the worst possible recipe that results in the being known as the smother. This toxic parent micromanages your life and ensures that you do exactly as they tell you. They might even force compliance by bribing or threat of punishment. This dominating behavior is to foster feelings of smallness or being lesser, so that you feel like you have no choice but to listen to them. How are you feeling? Are you
I think that was a good little intro of 7 points of toxic parenting because, again, one of the things that in many cultures they say, oh, it's cultural. Oh, it's cultural, and that's how they raised me, and all of these other things and conversations to negate the fact that you're not valuing the person as a human being, right? So essentially, it boils down to whatever ways, whatever manipulative tools, whatever, whether it be coercion, whether it be blackmail, whether it be physical force, whatever manipulative tools that parent uses to control the child, and oftentimes the adolescent and then the adult, is toxic parenting. They can do it from withholding love and acceptance and adoration and all of those things, or they can do it by, like they say, smothering, being overcompensating, where you're not allowing that soul to grow. Yeah, there's another part two. Malaya, put it this way, dear. Don't go this way, go this way. They don't allow for, and it goes up into adulthood, right? They don't allow for the voice of that child to be heard, or that soul. I say soul. Why do I say soul? Because just like a seed, it is only in that form for a limited amount of time. So if you keep saying child, 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 I'm not relegating the soul just to childhood, because there's a process as the soul grows, right? So when someone is born, that's a soul. That is a soul, ultimately, that is about to go on this journey from being an infant to being a toddler to growing until they become an adult. And as a parent, as a guardian, it's our responsibility to aid them, not to overshadow them, not to crush them. And imagine you have a seedling in your hand. It's now your job to foster the environment for it to grow and it to flourish and to do what ultimately is intrinsically within it to do. The seed doesn't need you to tell it how to grow. It already knows. It's already inside. You just create the environment, or provide the environment that's conducive to it growing, right? But some parents, and this goes back to some of the conversation that's had here, is that some parents, they didn't want children in the first place. Children were a consequence, an unwanted, for some, consequence of their actions and their parenting with resentment, their parenting with indifference, their parenting with hatred, their parenting with all of these things. So they're projecting that negative energy onto the soul that's within their care. And make no mistake about it, they're not going to get away. They're going to have to pay for their actions, but it's a matter of time. So for those who just joined us, we were watching a short. It's short, so I'm going to go over the 7 points that they named in the video, that you had a toxic parent, or possibly you are a toxic parent. They're self-centered, meaning they don't care nothing about you. Everything's about me. I'm hungry, I'm tired, who needs to do for me, blah, blah, blah. They're not empathetic or sympathetic. Something happens to you, they don't care because they don't feel for you. And I think it's difficult for some people because it's like, yo, you're my parent. So we have a certain expectation. And I think the healing process comes with, yeah, even though I have an expectation that this is supposed to be here, the reality is it's not here. And that will help to move beyond the hurt and the expectation of what is not. They're rude and disrespectful, right? They don't value you. They don't care. They just say what they want to say. They don't care how. And actually, some sadistic parents actually get some type of entertainment, some type of joy by causing you harm, by causing their child pain. Some sadistic parents actually like that kind of stuff. They overstep their boundaries. You have no personal space. You have no boundaries. You have no autonomy. They feel as though because they brought you into the world, that therefore they can do whatever they want to do. And that's not true. You know what I mean? But some people think that, don't they? They're overly demanding. Again, everything is for them. Anything that they do for the child, like even in some situations, the young adult or the child feels afraid to ask for what it is they need. Why? Because that parent is inhospitable, whether it be the mother or the father. And depending on which parent it is, that's going to have the different effect. You know what I mean? If you go to the nourisher and she doesn't have what you need, then sometimes we go to self-soothing and all of those other things. If you go to the father, who's supposed to be the protector and provider, then depending on if you're male or female, you're going to deal with that differently. This is why toxic parents affect males and females differently, and is dependent upon which parent, or if not both. I posted something on my other side of social media today, and another sister was like, she had two of them. So imagine if you had one, but if you have two, you're just overloaded. You understand? They're overly demanding. Six, they belittle you. Again, if y'all hearing background noise, just let me know. My apologies. You don't know already. We in the car. It's a nice day. And they control and dominate you, right? Um, So I try to, it's a very thin line, towing the line by between encouraging your child and not actually hearing their needs and trying to overpower them with your desires, what you want. We see in some cultures, oh, they want you to go be a doctor, even though that's not even within your desire, or they want you to be an engineer, or they want you to be whatever they want you to be. And they belittle what it is that you want and desire because it's not going to get them social standing. To a certain degree, that's toxic, is it not? So let's go on to part two here. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to share. I say this to say, like I said, because we're having conversations and people are like, oh, when there are two parents in the household, that don't mean that the person, oh, look, yeah, two parents in the household, our pop's a well-adjusted person. It don't work like that. There's so many other variables that go into this pot. Let's go to part two, which is 6 signs you have a toxic parent.
Better skin from your body wash? Try Olay Body Wash with skincare super ingredient collagen. Olay.
Hold on.
Hello, dear viewers, and welcome back to part 2 of signs you may have a toxic parent. It's common sense to distance yourself from toxic people, but what if those toxic people are your parents? When you see them every day, it can be extremely difficult to get any kind of break. Even though you may not have had a choice to be brought up by the parents you have, you do have a choice in how you choose to react towards them. So, here are 6 more common signs that could signal that you have a toxic parent. 1. They're manipulative. Toxic parents are masters of emotional manipulation. They have a way of twisting the truth so they look good while you look and feel awful. This can range from embellishment of a tale, outright putting words in your mouth, to even exposing a secret of yours. They may also make false promises to get what they want out of you. This manipulation also allows them to exploit you, as their love only extends as far as your usefulness, like a tool. Once you no longer provide a use, they stop putting in the effort of appearing to care. You may stand up for yourself to stop the manipulation, but then they might take you for a ride on the guilt trip train, telling you you're a bad or ungrateful son or daughter for abandoning them. In reality, they're just angry that they weren't able to take advantage of you.
And that's fact. As if it happened for a long extended period of time, as children, it messes up your emotional compass. It messes up your ability to reason. Everything is skewed because that's the lens by which you were introduced to the world. And this is how oftentimes people with toxic parents or these type of childhood, when you go to look for a mate, you often look for the person that's going to make you feel manipulate you in similar ways. If it's they use shame to control you, or guilt to control you, or anger to control you, oftentimes people, we become attracted to these people because that is the way in which we were injured, if it makes sense. So manipulation, lying, embellishing, the parent will, and they gaslighting. I wrote something earlier about gaslighting, but when you're unaware, that's when you can be easily manipulated. But once you become aware, get up, don't do that there. Once you become aware and you're able to navigate and kind of, it's weird, but kind of take yourself out of the situation and be able to observe the situation and get a handle on that situation, that's, I think, to a certain degree when the healing actually begins, right? But it's a process of acknowledging the way that particular person does it, what gaslights you, and how they manipulate you. What's their, for lack of a better word, people say drug of choice. What's their tactic of choice? What's their mode of operation?
2. They blame you. Some parents are so toxically irresponsible that they blame their children for everything that they perceive has gone wrong in their lives. They then use this as an excuse to lash out at you for things that aren't your fault. They didn't get the career they wanted? Well, that's because you were born. They're fighting with their spouse, maybe a divorce is imminent? Well, it's because they can't agree on how to raise you. You're such a problem. Did they lose their favorite pen? Well, you must have stolen it. You can see how ridiculous and toxic it gets. 3. They
Scapegoat. It's the scapegoat syndrome. The weakest person, the one that's not going to speak up, the one that cares too much, the one that wants to see peace, right? Whatever it may be, if you're the only child, whatever it is, they're going to, if you're the oldest, if you're the youngest, whatever it is that they have told themselves, that toxic person has told themselves, they, like they say, use that child as the reason, because never ever would one want to think that it's them. You know what I mean? Because they're self-centered. It can never be me. They can't handle the problem being them. So they're going to look for a child to be the problem. Like the other day, where did I go? Where did I go the other day? Oh, I went out the other day with the children, and I saw this woman. The way she yanked up, like it had to be like a 2-year-old. I'm thinking to myself, what in the world? You know what I mean? Like who is the parent and who is the child? I went to another like track meet. We was passing by an old high school, and they had a track meet, and I went out there with the children so that they could see, track meet. And this one lady, the child just kept, and he had to be too, because he was in Pampers. He was in Pampers with no pants, no onesie. I'm like, lady, you doing too much, but let's continue. Okay. And every 2 minutes he would get up and run away. And then she would run after him. And then she would bring him back. And then he runs away, and she runs after him and bring him back. I'm like, lady, you playing too many games. Are you the mother or are you the child? Right? And then when things happen, that parent will then blame the child, as opposed to taking responsibility for the fact that they were the older one. So oftentimes I noticed that toxic parents are stuck somewhere in their growth process. So the expectation that they would have the emotional intellect to deal with you as a parent, they haven't gotten there yet emotionally. So they're stuck at wherever their injury is, and therefore they are treating their child from the 14-year-old mind or the 8-year-old mind, even though they're whole adults. But okay, Nasha says a lot of women give up their career or life or their children. Wait, come again? Give up their career or life or their children. I don't understand bitter woman. Share a little more. They give up their life for the children, or they give up their career for the children. Share a little bit more on that one, and then I can respond. I mean, the bitter woman, again, bitterness comes from many things, right? And it really depends on what happened in that person's life, and what occurred for them to be bitter. Bitterness comes about in different ways, and that would be for that individual to, if we're talking about overall, people may not know how to deal with how they're feeling, and instead of choosing to be better, they just choose to be bitter. Like they said, they choose to internalize it and think on it and meditate on it, and brood oftentimes over it, whatever happened to them, and look to blame. Basically, bitterness is just going into a negative space about whatever happened to you. as opposed to looking at what happened to you at whatever time and saying, yo, this happened to me, but this, I'm gonna keep going. This happened to me, but it's all about our mindset. Better or bitter comes from a mindset, our inclination. Let me continue. The children out here running around, so I gotta be making sure that, okay, mister with the loudness in his car.
3. They actively block you being happy. Don't take this the wrong way. Sometimes they're just guiding you onto a more annoying but sustainable, productive path. That's not toxic or bad. With the toxic parent, this manifests as them ensuring you're always miserable if they can help it. This happiness blocker doesn't have to stem from severe situations like abandonment or beating. Just them putting a damper on everything is enough. If you dread seeing them or sharing any happy news with them because you know they'll just stomp on it, then you understand this is toxic behavior. 4. They're
Right. So sometimes people say that, get up off the grass. Get up off the grass. They fertilize the thing. Get up off the grass. Sorry. I don't know how many times I told her, don't lay. This, what in the world? So there's some parents, like friends, like people who don't like to see anyone excited. You ever seen somebody who, as soon as someone comes in excited, they're gonna find a way to deflate your balloon. They won't give you a moment to. There's some people who don't like see people laughing, don't like see people enjoying themselves. They just want to poo 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 all over your parade. So when this is an actual parent, then they have more ability to do so because of their, especially when you're growing up, because of their relationship to you. So sometimes the personality of the child changes to deal with. Give me a minute, 1 second. Okay, so I mean, a lot of women give up their childhood and career because of their children. I mean, if the childhood, if they push the child on, if you had a child early, I could understand, yeah, giving up their childhood and the career. I can also understand that some people do it by choice, and some people do it by because they were compelled to do it. I mean, there's so many different scenarios. For me, it really just depends on how we look at, I mean, this conversation. But for me, a primary, if you have children, it's not like if the person engaged and they had children, when then it's the person's responsibility. It's the man and the woman's responsibility to take care and do what they need to do to take care of these souls. I don't just see it as children. I see it as more than that. I see it as the obligation that we have, the responsibility that we have to take care of what we've created, right? So some people will say they didn't want to, but then again, unless it was a situation of force, one would have to have engaged in activity to bring forth children. So for some people, I think the resentment comes in because there's a disconnect from engaging in a certain activity to the outcome of that activity. For men as well, like some men say she put a baby on me, and for the life of me, the blessed life that the Creator has given me, I'm like, what are y'all talking about? How did she pin a baby on you? If you approached her to engage in the act of copulation, then what did you think was going to happen? Or what were the chances of it happening? And so that just goes to look at the thought process of what we want versus what we don't want. If you go into a casino in Las Vegas, you're not like, oh yeah, somebody pinned a jackpot on me. You went to the casino hoping that you get jackpot. I'm just saying, but let's continue. 4.
stable. Instability in most situations is not positive. Toxic parents are no different. These parents may have weak boundaries of their own, lacking the capacity to stand their ground in several aspects of their lives or give guidance to the child. This results in waves of lashing out at the child for problems stemming from the parents' overly permissive habits. They let the child do whatever they want, then explode in anger when it becomes problematic. 5. They're overly critical and mean.
Yeah, they went on that one again. They're revisiting some, but yeah, there's some toxicity. Like I said, it becomes because that particular adult is unstable, and because that adult is unstable, they transfer that onto the child. They have expectations of the child that they did not teach them. And I find it crazy, like even with this corona, and people like, oh, the children don't know how to read, and they're mocking them. I'm like, wait a minute, pause. Whose responsibility is it to teach them? How are you going to mock somebody? Oh, you don't know how to cook. Like my daughter the other day, she was like, let's watch Worst Cooks in America. And that show's crazy. And so we were sitting there watching, and you have 30, 40, 50-year-olds who don't know how to cook. I mean, when you become adult, you can no longer use the excuse that you know nobody ever taught you, because now you can learn. There's YouTube University, you know what I mean? But you have some people who that may be a 16, 17, 8-year-old, and you're mocking them for what they don't know, when it's the adult's responsibility to teach them and to engage them and get ready for life. So yeah, that instability within that toxic parent is what makes them toxic. If you could understand.
Imagine you feel good about finishing a paper. The toxic parent's response to you is to see a small error, so it's terrible. You start over, double checking for tiny errors. And now they tell you, the paper you used is not white enough. Why did you change it? It's garbage. The critique given is also usually not constructive. Quite often, they'll also be mean about the perceived failure, preying on insecurities, calling you names or highlighting your flaws to prove you're not good enough. Watch out for this red flag. If it feels like you're facing a nerve-ending staircase and are still being called a failure despite climbing several steps, you may have a toxic parent. And 6.
But before we get to 6, again, some people may be having these experiences but don't know how to classify it, don't know why it feels the way it does, especially if you're younger, a younger child, a teenager, adolescents. They're feeling something, they're feeling this disease within them, within their spirit, not wanting to go around this person, avoiding this person, staying in their room, being consumed with the computer and technology and TV, and they're becoming a recluse, and you don't know why, and they're just trying to avoid the uncomfortability of being around a person that's not desirable, right? Or they may do the opposite, where they go to the ends of the earth to try to please them, and they can never do it, and they become consumed with it. So again, for different types of people who may be listening and wondering, you know, what was it, or what was that thing I felt, there's a possibility that you were dealing with a toxic parent. Nasha said the responsibility of raising the children mostly on the woman. We need to be, I mean, that's not, I don't know if that's the conversation. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's this conversation as to whether or not the full responsibility or a lot of it is on the woman. This is whether it be males or females, whether that parent is a healthy enough human to contribute to the welfare of the child in a positive way. Queen T, welcome to the conversation. I think that's the conversation that's being had, whether the father is wholly responsible for protecting and providing, and the mother is mostly responsible for rearing the children. Are those people, as individuals, as humans, before they become parents, are they healthy enough, not perfect, but healthy enough that they don't wholesale transfer, thumbs up, yeah, the video, their issues to the children? I think that's the conversation. That's why I'm talking about toxic parents and the effects on the children, because it's if the mother doesn't I'm mostly responsible for the rearing of my children. I'm not mad. You understand what I'm saying? So I think I'm really coming from that perspective. I'm not upset that if you're providing and you're doing what you need to do, it's a lot of work. I'm not saying that it's not a lot of work, but I'm not upset. I'm not resentful. I'm not indifferent, because I figure if I go out and work for somebody else to pay someone else to take care of my children, why didn't I just take care of them myself? And I love being a mother. I love being present. It can be overwhelming, very overwhelming, but it also can be very rewarding. So with that, I don't see, putting other things that are going to gratify you from the world on hold while you take care of the responsibilities that you created collectively. I don't see that as a bad thing. But other people may see the child as a disruption as opposed to an addition and an enhancement and a blessing. So it really depends on the perspective that people have, first and foremost, about children. I mean, that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours.
They're severely abusive. Here is the most blatant and obvious sign of toxic parenting. When a parent, these people whose very roles are to nurture, support, and guide you, when they abuse you, they're toxic. The abuse can be physical, verbal, or emotional. It's all unhealthy and toxic, and you don't deserve that. Do you relate to or recognize any?
Okay, that's the end of that video right there. So we went over a few points that you can take away. You can write down and really, again, why am I doing this? This is not because I notice when we're talking about other people or something that is outside of us, more people come in, more people have things to say, because we don't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to hit home in a way. We don't have to really grapple with the information for ourselves. But when we have these type of conversations, it's difficult. I understand that it's difficult, but it's also necessary. Yeah, it's also necessary. And so let me see what his name, toxic parents and their broken children. Yeah, so those are some of the signs and symptoms that that, yo, I didn't even realize it. Because people be like, I don't know if you see some of these posts on social media, and they may have a slipper, a broom, an extension cord, and then there'll be a caption like the things that they disciplined me with. And when you look back at it, you're like, what in the world? You know what I mean? The way in which people were disciplined, the expectations that some of the old school, quote unquote, have of how you govern children, that was toxic, is what I'm saying. Because you have to look at some of the corporal punishments. If we're talking about the enslavement and the experience here, some of that is the vestiges of chattel slavery. Yeah, some of that is the vestige of oppression. And there are people and parents who think, oh yeah, they stripped you naked and they wet your skin and then they took a switch and they beat you, bruh. When you see it in the slave movie, you say, yo, master was wrong, but because your grandparent did it, it's right. No, you could have disciplined the child in another way. The child just not being allowed to use their voice, and then you wonder what happens to their voice when they get older. You compromise their energetic space within their voice. So now they can't speak up for truth and they can't say what it is they need. Why? Because you broke them in that area. I talk about potty training, and if a parent is resentful and indifferent or scornful or whatever they are, by helping a being who is learning to control their bowels. And if during that space, either they don't have time, they're neglectful, they let you sit in your poo and your pee, whatever happened, or they were attentive, it taught you that I can trust people with my very earthly needs. I can trust this adult. All of those stages of growth, there's a lesson in it for each and every one of us. And if our parents and our guardians did not do what they're supposed to do, those are the areas that plague us in today's space and time. It's interesting that the other day somebody came to me and said, oh, this person is sick, X, Y, and Z. And based on the activities of that person, I said, it's possibly prostate cancer. Then the story comes back, it's prostate cancer. How in the world did I know that? Because it's very simple. If we look at human beings and we look at energy, which is action, which is word, which is thought, this is what energy is. And we look at how that person spends their life day and night, day and night. It's not rocket science to then say, you're going to have heart problems. You're going to end up with lung problems. You're going to end up with this. Why? Because you keep doing a certain activity. It's really simple when we boil it down, is what I'm trying to say. So if you look at the type of parent that you had specifically, and the experiences that you had specifically and the dynamic within your home specifically, and you use these as a guide, as an outline, you will begin to understand, okay, why am I this way? This all goes back to know thyself. And in order, oftentimes, to know ourselves, we have to understand in our environment what brought us to this point. It's like looking at the soil and looking at a plant, and you have the same seed, and one was planted in North Carolina, other one is planted in Florida. Different soil, different seed, different nutrients, different minerals. One comes out one way, one comes out the next way. Somebody who wants to analyze that is going to be like, take soil samples, take water samples, take, for you to understand, well, how did this one grow like this and this one grow like that? So that's my conversation for those who just joined us. Let me share the link on toxic parenting, is that sometimes we just need a base, a foundation, something to work from, not just this whole general, that's just how Black people are, so-called. That's just how we were raised. That's just how, nah, man, done with that. Enough of that, no, man. Yeah, you may have been raised like that, and you may have grown to this point, but you're toxic. You may have been growing children are to be seen and not heard. And then when children are abused because they're seen and not heard, and then when they grow up and become abusers, you're like, I don't know, I didn't raise him like that. Yes, you did. You didn't raise them to speak. You didn't raise them to tell you what was wrong. You raised them to attack them when they told you that someone else did something to them because it made you feel uncomfortable. And then the adults is like, I did the best I can. Done with that. No, to man. We have to be more conscious and more aware and more present. This is one of them days, so y'all please bear with me. Welcome to those who just joined us. We're having a conversation about toxic parenting. We just went over to a few videos, 2 videos from Psych2Go. They outlined some of the things, some of which are, they don't concern themselves. They're not empathetic. They're verbal abusers or physical abusers or emotional abusers. They don't respect your personal space. What else? Does anybody remember anything else you just heard? Negative self-talk. You're never good enough. They're the ones who possibly not meeting the needs of the child, having expectations of the child that they did not. And again, it's hard. It's difficult. I would say it's difficult being a parent. It's difficult. It's very difficult. Yeah. But there's a level of conscious awareness, I would say, that even if as a parent you're wrong, the ability to acknowledge the child, that soul, that's why I like to say that soul, to acknowledge them when you wrong them in that moment validates their existence. I've had to say to my children, oh, mommy said that, my apologies, I'm sorry. And it doesn't take nothing off of you. It doesn't mean that you're less than. It means that you're human. You understand what I'm saying? And some parents think that the way in which you, why my son looking at, why are you peeping at me like that? Some parents think that the way in which you interface with the child is by making them less than. It's kind of like racism. You can't talk to me because you're not on my level. Right? Or ageism or sexism. You can't talk to me because you're not of the right sex. You can't talk to me because you're not the right color. What you have to say doesn't have any validity because you're not the right age. You don't have the right job. Right? So we think that's a means of control. I'm going to talk to the child any way I want to, because what can they say to me? They have no power. And when they do have power, when they grow up and they say, you know what, I don't want to deal with you, then you say, oh, you're wicked and you're ungrateful and all the things I've done for you. And how could you? One of the issues, and my mother's a social worker, and oftentimes she expresses angst and just confusion at one of her jobs is if somebody lands in the hospital, let's say in this case, they're an elder, one of her jobs is to find family members. Oftentimes without much information to go on. She has to find the family member, alert the family member, and see if the family member wants to take responsibility for their parent. Oftentimes she finds if they have children. And then sometimes the children are like, no, I don't want to deal with that person. But her job is to get them out the hospital to family. And she would come and express her frustration. And I'm like, to tell you the truth, mommy, you don't know what that parent did to that child, that in the old age, the child is like, I don't want to deal with that. It sounds wrong and messed up, but the reality is that person could have abused them their whole life. And that's what we were talking about yesterday as well. And it's difficult because the Bible tells you honor your mother and your father. Yeah. And it's difficult to look at somebody who possibly may have abused you, exploited you, broke you, and then turn around and say, now you have to take care of that person. Now you're responsible for that person. These are real life struggles that people experience. And then we on the outside who don't even take the time to consider, like, hey, what could be really going on here? What can be really going on here? Why would this person, it could be that the person is selfish. It could be that the person is done, right? To say, listen, I had enough. I don't, this is not something that I want to pursue, right? So again, it takes so many, and I put the link in the box, but I know oftentimes, you know what I mean? I think I'll read a little bit of what someone shared today. And if we don't have anybody else who wants to chime in, hopefully this information will be beneficial to someone somewhere, or even just a release to acknowledge that you're seen and you're heard and you're not crazy. You know what I mean? That you're seen and you're heard and you're not. Where did he go? Hold on one second. That you're seen and you're heard and you're not crazy, right? Because oftentimes you go to family member and friends, and then because the person, if they're an abuser and they don't have that experience with the person, they will try to convince you that you're crazy because you don't have an experience. I'm gonna share something I wrote. I wrote something this morning, so it was on my mind. I said some parents are out here gaslighting and manipulating their child, right? Because it can be done. It's something they do abuse your children, but it's under the guise of parenting. It's like the pastor abusing the people, the congregants, but it's under the guise of being a pastor. And so because you have a title with it, it's hard to conceive that this person with this title who's responsible for these things could actually do something like this. And anytime we hear about a parent or a pastor or somebody in a position of authority or the teacher that sleeps with the student, we're like, no, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. Why? Because of the position that they're in. But someone says, as a child of a manipulative gaslighter mother and father. So you had it on two sides. Yes, dear? Okay, so stop playing over there. I hate that this is still a thing in 2022. Okay. Shake my head. I legit do not even speak to the people that created me because of what they did to my mental state while I was growing up. Now folks tell me I should love my parents and speak to them daily, and if I don't, something is wrong with me. And the wrong is that I don't trust them nor want any interactions with them due to the mental obstacle courses that they made me run through as a child, all while making me believe that every wrong in the earth came about because of my birth. We just went over that in the thing that this is the people who blame you for everything because they don't want to take responsibility. Shake my head. Folks need to stop doing that madness to their children. It's evil that is not easily shaken or tossed away. And that's the brokenness that it caused in the person, right? That you break them in this way. And then, years later, you're like, what did I ever do? I fed you and clothed you. And they misremember all of the things that they did that caused the pain that you're in now, because in their mind, they did the bare minimum. We see Nasha. Let me see here. Hold on one second. Nasha, welcome to the conversation. Feel free to share your thoughts.
Greetings, my Emuna.
Good
I
morning.
can
Good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm fine. I hear some echo. Is it disturbing? Oh, now it's gone. Okay. Yes, I can absolutely relate to that so much. But the thing is, my issue is just that, I do understand that mm, being the mother, that things are not easy. My issue is I cannot blame my mother or even women at large with the knowledge that of patriarchy and all this stuff. So sometimes it is just too much for that one parent to raise, a child. So I think it's a very complex thing that I think sometimes when I think about it, I do understand why in ancient African culture, not now, there was this quote that uh, a child is raised by a village, not by a single or by parents. It means the whole village were involved in raising a soul. And I do understand why, because I don't think that two people alone can raise a whole spirit. You know, there must be support and help there to give the spirit what it needs. Because sometimes the parent really does not know better. Absolutely. That's all what I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. I agree. They do say that it takes a village to raise a family because you can't be everywhere at all times and see everything. First of all, the parent is also a person and they can be overwhelmed. So an overwhelmed parent can um, manifest their experience in a toxic way. It doesn't mean that they wholly are a toxic person, right? But if they don't, like you're saying, they don't have a support system, that's overwhelmed, it's too stressful, there's no downtime, that can manifest itself, that can make a good parent appear to be a bad one, right? That if she had or he had the right support system, then they would be a different person. And I totally agree with that. Absolutely 100% agree with that. The issue comes in, I guess, in today's space and time where the village is no longer there, or they feel like it's not their responsibility, or they have a different understanding of what it takes to raise a healthy soul. You know what I'm saying? What it takes to raise a well-adjusted child. And you're going to get different elements of people based on what they feel is most important. But if the core of it is not there, the people are not in agreement that we're raising this child, this soul, to become a, like they say, a model citizen or a positive contribution to society. You may have, like in the case of Kevin Samuels, I got to just bring it up. According to him, he has his mother, his two aunts, and the grandfather. But then you start going around the uncle who's a player. So you have people in the village that because they're not necessarily upstanding characters, they will begin to sow these weeds amongst the good seed that was planted. They may start to put in the mind of the child, this is what you do to them women, or this is how you move around these dudes. You know what I mean? And this is how you use people, and that's how the child becomes corrupted. So I do agree that the village is good if it's a good village. I think I'm basically saying if it's a good village. You know what I mean? If it's not a good village, they're going to be teaching your child all kind of foolishness. That later on, will either the child is going to be aware enough to not take that advice, or they're going to go with it and end up in places in life that they would rather not. For those who just joined us, we're having a conversation about toxic parents and their broken children. I thought it was there's a trend on TikTok that's talking about, and for me it's just like too much. Sometimes it's about talk about your toxic parent and the things parents say to children, and I'm just like, bruh. You know what I mean? Like, what in the world? So we have to just keep that. Like I said, when you say mother, the same thought doesn't come to everybody's mind. When you say father, it's going to be based on their experiences. And in order for us to have these conversations more where we are seeing people and we're acknowledging people's reality, it's helpful to get beyond just what we experienced and using our picture of mother, father, grandmother, grandfather for everybody's picture, because the reality is it is not. My grandmother may knit, yours may not. Mine may, yours may bake, mine may not like to cook. So you can't just say grandmother and just think cookies and milk and knitting. Everybody's grandmother doesn't do that, or they didn't do that. You know what I mean? So with that said, what time is it? 54. Hopefully, like I said, I think I'll leave the link to the thing in the box. Go ahead, Nasha. You wanted to say something?
Yes, I just had one last question. It's Dr. Chris Worthing said on the interview one time that black women should bear children after the age of 30 and black men the age of 35. And
Again?
uh, Dr. Creswell think, she said on the interview, black women should bear children after the age of 30 and black men age 35. This is the age she said, black women and black men should then get children. The woman 35, the men 35. My question was, can we tell young people to wait to engage in that behavior until they're 30 and 35? Mm-mm. That's my question. It doesn't make sense for me. Do you understand? Do I make sense?
I mean, the world that we're living in, it really bombards children, young adults with thought process. I think conversations need to be had so that you can understand. A lot of the stresses come from not being ready, not being prepared to bring life forth, not being financially stable, not knowing yourself, therefore you don't relate to others well. I see where she's saying. I wouldn't necessarily put a hard number on it, but the reality is that a lot of the abuses we're seeing is that someone may not have gotten to the mature level to deal with another soul. So there is some credence to it. If the 19-year-old or the eight, like the lady we saw yesterday, the 18-year-old impregnates the 13-year-old, there's going to be stress around who's taking care of you, who's taking care of the children, how do we manage, how do we eat, where do we live, right? Can an 18-year-old provide what is needed for the woman and the child that he created? It wasn't even a woman, it's a girl. So there is some validity to the fact that young children, these young children should not be engaging. And I think it is realistic if they understand. Now, everybody's not going to comply, but young children should not be engaging sexually when there's the reality is you don't have the capacity to maintain that which you have created. It's the same reason that you can't. Young children are not going buying houses. You don't have any credit. You don't have any down payment. You don't have the capacity to engage in this level of a transaction. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do understand. My issue is just that, I don't think that we can say to men, wait to, engage in this behavior until you are 35. No man is going to do that. In no ancient culture, if we say we look at other cultures, the parents do give men a house and then the wife would then move in. But even in that, indigenous culture, the man will be in his 18, 19, but the parents will give him a home or build a one for him and his wife. So I don't think telling men to wait until they're 35, they're not going to do that. I think we need to be honest here. I do understand women maybe, because women take the blame and the baggage. But I don't think that men have enough discipline to do that. That's my only thought on it.
I think you've
I
arrived
don't,
at one of the key issues is discipline, right? And
yes.
connecting the act with the consequence. Right
Mm,
now it's like you know how you buy something from the store and it comes in a pack and then it says do not sell separately. This
mm,
whole conversation is do not sell separately. And what they have done is sold it separately, and it's causing a problem. If you disconnect sexual intercourse from committed relationship, from the capacity to maintain and take care of that which you've created, this compounds the stresses that we're experiencing, because people are looking for things and even are being told and encouraged to expect things of people that they have no desire to be responsible for. That's crazy. But here we are, like you're saying, the discipline, that there's a disconnect. For the same reason you don't just go driving through the country and every land you see you start building on it. It's the same reason you, as a man, you should not just be going into every woman that looks good. That makes no sense. Men, if you are here, please let us know something. What that's a lack of discipline. You can
What other cultures have done is
come again.
hello?
Yeah, come again. Go ahead, sis.
Okay, what other cultures have done was having village wives, wives who would, engage with them, with those men until they are ready to marriage. Like the Kumba people, the Lee people in Congo, they have a village wife where men can go to, until they are ready to marry.
So the village
And
wife is the local woman that any man could go and sleep with.
Exactly. Until they are ready. I can send you some books, some article to read. You know,
So, but
uh,
they kind of have that. They call them jump offs. But I'm trying to figure out how does that deal with the issue at hand? Because doesn't that exploit another soul for the purpose, for the very same reason? Because the man that cannot have discipline. You know what I'm saying? So if he
people
doesn't
say,
have,
yeah,
mhm.
people say that the village woman, as the way I've read it, she's very well respected. Those boys go to her, they give her some presents. She has 4 5 men in her heart, in her home. And any man can go to her, married or unmarried, but mostly who go to her are young men until they're 40 or 50. This is when they mostly then get married. You know, women on the other hand should engage their behavior when they are married. They either can be wives or village women. But people say this is what I've read, that she's well respected. She people like her. So I don't know. I'm not from that tribe, but this is what I have read. So
You
this
know, when I have
issue,
some time, I'm gonna look that up. That sounds very interesting. I'm
yes,
gonna look. Go ahead.
yes, for me also is very interesting. But they do acknowledge that there is a man under development, that men do want to engage in this behavior. Because if she gets pregnant, in this village, all men are the fathers, and she's always left with one man who do take care of the child. So there is somebody who then will take care if she gets pregnant. But there is
That's
a acknowledgement of men under development.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't see that as a. I think that's something that they came up with to deal with whatever it is that they may be experiencing. But as you said, I don't think that necessarily speaks to the lack of self discipline and of the man and his procreative tool. You know what I mean? I think that's like a kind of way that people introduce to kind of mitigate some of the damages that otherwise may occur if there wasn't this outlet, so to say. But yeah, that's interesting. John says, tell the woman to stop having hot girls. Yo, John, get on the mic, man. I'm not doing this today. That women are the ones having, who are they having it with, John? Come on. This is John to be John, you're interesting. That's all I say. Get on the mic if you wanna share that hot girl summer conversation. They're having it with these men. I wanted to come back, but weirdly on this particular, if I'm not on my laptop, I can't share my screen weirdly. I don't know what that's about. And I wanted to, that's why I'm not doing the video today. I'm just doing playing the thing. But I wanted to talk about now John made me forget what listening to John, I forgot what I was trying to talk about. It escaped me, but it'll come back. Uh it totally left my mind. So let's go back to the topic of toxic parenting and their broken children. What promiscuity oftentimes is a result, male and female, is a result from experience, lack of self-government, exploitation as a child, molestation as a child, um, low self-image. All of these things contribute to being promiscuous and just giving yourself to any and everybody, because ultimately that ends up to emptiness. It creates an emptiness inside, you know what I mean? So that also is an extension sometimes from a lack or the childhood experience. So when we see people and we want to just blame, you know, their current state and not connect it to the experience that they're having, I think we lose the lessons that we could learn, and we just go round and round on this, it's your fault, it's her fault, it's his fault, it's his fault. That's not why I'm doing this. That's not why I have these conversations. I have these conversations because what's done is done. I have these conversations so that for me, I can learn, I can share while I'm learning, and I can understand. Okay, like a friend reached out to me, and I'm just listening to the story. I had a little time and let her talk for a good little time, and then when I shared my thoughts, she was like, "Wow, for months I was trying to figure this out." Right? And so all of these little pieces, it will help us to get understanding. And it says wisdom is principle. That's what the Bible tells you. Solomon tells you, but with all you get understanding. And understanding is what oftentimes brings peace. Is what brings that resolve. Is what helps us to forgive, and it helps us to let go when we can understand. Not saying all the time you're going to understand, but for me, understanding has helped me to have a level of peace and knowing that I can let this go because it has run its course and it served its purpose. Anything else that you want to share? The top 10% of men. Oh, John, with the statistics. What do you think about that? Has nothing to do with toxic parenting. Can we just talk? Can we comment on the topic? Toxic parenting and their broken children. Did you have toxic parents? Were you a broken children? Were you a toxic parent? Did you break children? If we stay in this vein, then the conversation can move forward. Did you have toxic parents? Did they break you as a child? Are you a toxic parent? Or do you know any within your generation? And have you said anything? Did you try to intervene? Did you try to speak to them on the child's behalf? If you've seen toxic parenting, how do you interface? Or do you not? Are you not of the village mentality? Do you leave them alone and just let them, do whatever they want? What are your thoughts? So have you seen it? If you have, what have you done? And have you had that experience? That's really, I think, and then leave your comments in the box below, because it's only when we're honest and we're authentic in our conversations that we can actually move forward. Throwing statistics is not going to get us to where we're trying to go. Deflecting is not going to get us to where we're trying to go. Derailing conversations is not going to get us to where we're trying to go. Okay. Here comes John again. Anybody else have anything to say? Feel free to share at this time. Just in this space for the time that I've been, and did you see even y'all even made Iyan look like I'm done. Iyan Van Zandt was like, I cannot fix y'all life. I am absolutely done. Iyan is like, wrap it up. The season's over. Leave them. Y'all are even up and I'm done, because it's enough to say the people are broken. Oh, this is what's happening. But when you want to have real conversations, people want to play around. People want to play around. You know what I mean? And that's part of the problem. Even y'all over here on YouTube, like, I'm done with the fixing of the life now.
Okay, so thank you, Imuna.
Thank you so much, Nasha. Thank you for joining us.
There's something also before I leave. What I realize on parents is, if a child goes to another adult and complains about his parents, most of the times adults protect each other. They would then tell the child, what were you doing? You're gonna understand your family, you're gonna understand your mother. Come on, they are feeding you. So I have realized that even when the child is trying to find help, it is very difficult for them because parents protect each other, even in the toxic behavior. I mean, this is my experience.
This is also true. They have a bit of a united front. That they don't want to, and that's kind of why we're having these conversations, because we're talking about how you relate. Are you being honest? What do you do if this is happening? And that was much of the old school, that you create this united front and the child is the enemy, or the one that, you know what I mean? But hopefully these type of things will change these narratives and these conversations. You know what I mean? So that's not the case, because it can be a united front of adults who knew that something was wrong, let's say, and oftentimes knew that child was being abused and said nothing. Right? Because community, sometimes they support the abuser and chastise the abused. And the only way we can change this narrative is by changing the narrative. This goes for parenting. This goes for people at large. The person who's getting violated, and the people stand behind the abuser, and judge the person who said something. I saw a guy, a European guy. He was in Japan. I think he was in Japan or someplace. And he was on the street and he saw a young lady folded over. I don't know if you guys saw this. and he found a young lady. She was folded over, drunk. She looked like she was comatose, and he was like, he was live, and then he saw it, and he was like, yo, that doesn't look right. He sees 4 guys around her looking real suspect while she's drunk, and he says, I know this might not go over well, but I'm going to go alert the police that this girl is unconscious and these guys are going somewhere with her. That is something for you to say. I know it's not going to go over well. Oftentimes people say mind your business until you don't mind your business and something happens, or you do mind your business, something happens, then they say, why didn't you say something? So ultimately, in his breast broken Japanese, he goes over there and tries to alert the police that this may be a situation. So it's also society at large. You know what I mean? It's also the mentality of society at large, that it's okay until something big happens, and then why didn't you say something? What John over here saying? I'm talking. So that's the reason she quit the show, John. John mad. John, you mad ever since we read the Shahrazad Ali thing? You upset about that? I think John been mad since the Shahrazad Ali expose, man. Shahrazad she was left field with her conversation. You understand? She had some things, and then other things she had an agenda. It was clear. We went over that. For those who missed it, you might want to go. That's when I had a little more time. You might want to go check that out. Shahrazad Ali, the elder, had a lot to say, and it was clear that there was great bias within the book. Okay. And if there was enough people to listen to what she said, then why is it the situation thus? You know what I mean? Why is it still what it is? Questions we must ask. So if anybody have anything else to say, feel free to do so at this time. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap. What time now? I promised them to go to I promised them to go to the to play tennis. We just learning to play tennis. So what time is it? It's 4 o'clock. So with that said, thank everybody for tuning in. As always, hopefully this conversation could continue to wherever you are, and it's helpful too, because I will say this. Hold on. There's some people who don't value the little pieces of the puzzle that ultimately fit into the bigger piece. So if you're not trying to put anything together and you're not trying to understand, then the little pieces will mean nothing, because you're not trying to understand anything, right? But if you do have an objective, like, I want to understand, know thyself, I want to put these pieces together, then they will have value. So I understand that for some people, it's just like these random topics. What is she talking about? What does this have to do with that? And so, you just see it as an entertainment or something just to talk about, and then you go about your way. But for me, this last 20 plus years of my life has been putting pieces together. And I tell you something, in recent times, I told you guys I was doing the my family tree. Yeah. So in recent times, I said, and I've been putting it together for like 20 years, a piece here, a little there. And so in recent times, like last 2 weeks ago, I went back on, because you're gonna split. You're gonna go to mother and father, and then you're gonna go to grandmother and grandfather, and then on the mother's side, and grandmother and grandfather on the father's side. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to undertake. So this time I said, let me go to my mother's people, right? And so I just found out I did a fresh search, and I was just in amazement, like, wow, more stuff came up. More confirmations came up. More documentations came up. So I think it's cool, because I've been looking to put the pieces together. Unlike other families, my family got a disconnect. They didn't come over with all the information. They didn't narrate all of this information, because they left from the Caribbean and they came to America, and then life took over. So people are not passing stories, and without stories, they say when somebody dies, a whole library burns to the ground, because the life lessons, the stories, the experiences are gone. They're not written down, they're not remembered, and they're gone. So, as someone who values that, to find more confirmation about what's in my lineage and where it's coming from, it empowers you as you go forward. This is one of the reasons why the name was changed, families was broken up and disconnected, because it disempowers the person. It disempowers you, it cuts you off from that vibration of hearing that name. And all of that is in our DNA. So if you don't hear it and it's not familiar to you, then you're kind of like lost and still feeling unfulfilled. Yeah. John, let's see here. What is John saying? John, we could talk about that at another time. We can talk about that at another time. But I say that to say, if you are on the journey of putting the pieces together of your own family lineages, I would say it's worth it. I would say take your time. I would say there's more information out here than we think. You know what I mean? And it's not just, a DNA test, really, because a DNA test can only tell you but so much. But if you have living family members and they can narrate stories to you and experiences, I say this because, and this is in line with toxic parenting, and then I'm gonna peace out. Some of this, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, is recycled energy that has not had an opportunity to resolve, because you are on the same energetic frequency of that ancestor that had this test, if you can understand what I'm saying. So some of this is just energy hopping from generation to generation until it's dissolved, until it's renewed, until it's recycled in a way where it can now become something else. So basically the same test is going to come up. You may see that the great grandfather uh whatever, I don't know, has an issues with relationships, right? And then you see the grandfather had issues with relationships, and you see the son has issues with relationships, and now you have issues with relationships. And then you look down the family line and like, wow, that's true. 4 generations. I wonder why. There's some tests now that you have in your hand, like a relay race, that it's your turn to either deal with it or not. And if you don't, then it just come back again. Does it make sense? Are you understanding what I'm saying? And so when I see these familiar patterns, what I do when people do reach out is I help them to see these familiar patterns and see where this energy is coming from and see why it's recycling. And then you can get some clarity of what you need to do to move forward. India, what's going on? Yeah. And I think these conversations on YouTube and wherever they're taking place, if they're not giving us real life tools, then they're just juicing your time and wasting your energy. Because how can you take back to your real life things that don't apply? It just gets you emotionally hyped. Yeah. Black, so-called black men are this. Yeah. So-called black men are that. Okay, now what? The single parents are doing this. Okay, now what? How does that? What do I got to do with you? At the end of the day, what does it got to do with you? What does it have to do with yours? How you going to fix your problem? How you going to deal with your self-esteem? How you know what I mean? How are you going to change the narrative if you don't even know what the narrative is? If you never read the story. Oh, John, did you check? John, may have enough things at the end, John. Sometime when I sit in my car, I'm actually sharing some of my downtime. I'm actually sharing some. My oldest is doing her homeschool right now. The young youth them is playing, and I'm actually sharing some of my downtime, John. Sometimes I don't even come on this thing. So I'll be 100% honest. I'm not even in the Shaza Ali vibration right now, because I think we spoke to it. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's anything else to speak to as it relates to where she was coming from. Some people think a man wrote the book. I think it was heavy leaning, you know what I mean? And she had an objective with it. And, you coming from Islam, you're looking to recruit to a certain degree. And it was in that vein. It wasn't overt, but it was covertly in the vein of recruiting people to a certain thought process and ideology. That's my thoughts on it. So whatever, I've seen her interviews. I think I spoke to that. So you might want to check that out as it relates to that. Hopefully that was helpful. You're welcome, India. You're welcome. Sometimes John be like giving me whole homework assignments. I got one more class to do, and it's starting on Monday. So y'all might or y'all might not see me. I got one more class to finish up, and I took an accelerated one. This college algebra is back for me again, talking about if you don't pass the test, it's coming back. College algebra is back for me again. So I have to spend the next 8 weeks knocking this thing out so I could just finish something I started a long time ago. You understand? It's all about growth and elevation. But with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to make our move, boogie on over. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the box below. And we'll talk again next time.